this week, and we're going to look at the football season. It's now fast approaching its end. This weekend is the end of the football season. Certainly the Premiership, and in terms of the playoffs, they're coming to a head, and also the European competitions, domestic European competition. Sorry, not the domestic, but the club European competitions end next Wednesday and Saturday with the Europa League final and the Champions League final, respectively. So looking back over the season, Tom, and looking at the outcomes that we've experienced, obviously COVID has had a major part to play in terms of fans not being allowed there until the penultimate match, which have taken place this week, and obviously with the Super League. But in terms of who's won the competitions and generally, what's your take?
Well, before I mention a few things sort of football related, I just want to say to our viewers, we want 10 by 6 to be a show for everyone. And whilst obviously we have a slant or a direction to talk about politics, both local, national, international, and cover some local stories, mostly good news stories, local initiatives and green initiatives particularly, we did also want to sort of broaden our appeal by sometimes talking about less political issues, and that includes sometimes talking about sports or arts, entertainment, music, etc. So I just thought I'd let our viewers know. If you have absolutely zero interest in football, then maybe wind on about 10 minutes. Okay, yes. So it's been a fascinating season, a really good season, I think, in terms of some of the football played. But and obviously it's fabulous to see some fans being able to be back in stadiums, and hopefully COVID numbers will remain low enough for that to continue, and eventually for us to get back to capacity stadiums, etc. Like some other countries have been able to do. Obviously, New Zealand being a prime example, they've been able to, because they've got 0 cases almost all the time, they're able to have festivals and music concerts and sporting events with full arenas. Hopefully at some point we'll be able to get to that ourselves. Anyway, so great to see some fans back in the stadium, and some genuine noise, which is great. There's been some terrific highlights, I think, of the season, and for me, I mean, there's great to see a team come up last year and stay up. That's Leeds, who have been incredible to watch. Fabulous attacking football, loads of goals at each end. They've scored loads, conceded loads. Every game has been exciting to watch. Bielsa as a manager is clearly a very good, astute tactical manager, but also very keen to play good possession football and a high press, but also to attack. So that's been great fun to watch, and they've thoroughly deserved to finish where they are and to stay up. Sadly, the other two clubs that came up last year, Fulham and West Brom, have gone back down again. So yeah, great to see Leeds doing well. The season, great also to see Leicester do so well. I'm a big fan of their manager, and also the whole way that their club is set up and run. Seems to be very family orientated and involving the fans, and they seem to be sort of like one big team, which is really good. So great to see them do well in the league and win the FA Cup, which was very exciting. The season's ended also with the retirement, and it sounds like he genuinely means it, the retirement of Roy Hodgson, who's obviously been around a long time, and is highly respected as a genuinely nice man and decent manager. So yeah, thanks to Roy for all he's done for the game over decades. Yeah, from my point of view, I feel a little bit sad it's not Sam Allardyce, but he's leaving West Brom, but he'll be back, I think. But his brand of football isn't particularly my cup of tea, though I'm sure he's a nice man.
Oh, it's interesting you should say that, because there was an interview by Antonio of Chelsea, of West Ham, I'm so sorry, about West Ham last night, in which he came out and he said something similar to you, and Sam Allardyce went off the edge, basically saying, if you look at the way that football that I've managed over the last 8 or 9 years, It bears no relation to that. My players play the ball on the floor. We don't play with two big men up front. We don't stick them down the flanks and kick them over the top. He said you can look at some of these managers who they claim play beautiful football, do exactly that in occasions in the games. They do it no more or no less than I do. It's just that I've been branded like that, probably because I've been with clubs that have been lower down the league and they've been fighting for survival and they've had to just adopt strategies and techniques. But you said that you give me a club where I've had a safe position in the league, or I've got teams up and promoted, etc. They play on the ball. They play the ball on the floor as much as anybody. So you said it's become really lazy journalism. For
to be fair
just...
to Allardyce, he's genuine. He's he has been relatively successful, but he's particularly tended to go, as he says, relatively short term, and to clubs that don't have vast amounts of money and resources to buy the most talented players, and that are facing a relegation battle. And he's generally been quite successful in keeping clubs up. And given that every week his teams are facing teams that cost a lot more and probably are better technically and in terms of keeping the ball and playing possession football, like you say, he's probably been forced somewhat into adopting a strategies, different tactics to try and compete against those teams, try and play the same beautiful possession on the floor football that those Man City and Liverpool, etc., play. His teams probably would have been murdered, so he has to go for something else. So to be fair to him, he makes a fair point there.
Yeah. For my take, the wall-to-wall coverage that we've had of football, because the fans haven't been allowed into the stadiums, has meant that whereas before, as a football supporter, you'd look out for when the television channels were going to show your team, and you might be lucky if you have 2 a month. Sometimes if you're the big clubs, 3, but usually around, say, 2 a month ish. And of course now, if you're in European competitions, you can be on 3 times a week. So actually, we've been almost fed this diet now of repetitive, continuous football with sort of a fake crowd noise in the background to create an atmosphere. And actually, it's going to be very difficult when the crowds come back for all these people that support these clubs but live miles and miles away and can't get anywhere near the ground and never really could, apart from on special occasions, to go back to Match of the Day or the highlights on the app, on their phone or whatever, instead of being able to, as they have done for the last year, 18 months, plan their week around sitting down and watching it on the television, possibly with other members of their family, and increasingly now as restrictions go down with friends. So I think that's a big significant thing that's happened this season. The way in which we interact with football has dramatically changed, and I think it could have a knock-on effect as COVID eases in terms of the way in which people have got to readjust to what it was like before. As I say, especially with the big clubs, where their fan base is often just as much away from that city as it is in it. So that's an interesting one. I think also I'd like to see more clubs winning trophies, because I've got it. Manchester City have spent more money than any other club. They are owned by owners from outside of, from Abu Dhabi. It's all dependent upon oil. Yes, they've invested in the local area, but they hardly ever play. I mean, people go on about Phil Foden, but they hardly ever play any recruitments from their youth system. It's just, they've got a superb manager in Pep Guardiola, but if they'd won the FA Cup and they win the Champions, if they won the FA Cup, which obviously they didn't, Leicester won it, beating Chelsea, and if they won the Champions League next Saturday, they could have won all 4 trophies. Mm-hmm. And people say about the Premiership being the best league in the world. Well, I don't think it's really the best league in the world when it becomes so uncompetitive and so dominated by very wealthy, and I use this term advisedly, foreign owners who make their money out of fossil fuels.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or insurance. With United and with Manchester United and Liverpool, have insurance and big sponsorships from massive corporations, and that effectively just ticks the box each season as to who wins the trophies. So we go on and we celebrate big time when Leicester won it in 2016, and when they win the FA Cup for the first time in 2021. But the reason so many neutrals are euphoric about that occurring is because it's so abnormal.
Yeah, I mean, there's domination by the big clubs that have massive resources, and as you say, the owners have often accumulated their wealth through businesses which aren't necessarily good for the planet or for people. So yeah, not necessarily something to celebrate, but obviously that's the nature of modern football across the world, and probably more so than anywhere else in the Premiership.
But look at
But
Bayern
yeah, I mean, I did.
Sorry, Tom. Sorry.
Yeah.
But look at Bayern Munich, their domination. But they are a fan-owned club.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a fan-owned club, where effectively there's a much more democratic processes going into the manager that's chosen, the style of football that a manager brings, in a way you can sort of look at that and think, well, the fans have had their say. But you can't say that about these other clubs in the Premiership, because it's not the fans. It's just very, very, very rich people who make those decisions. And the fans have to like it or lump it.
Well, hopefully, I mean, obviously one of the big stories of this season was the recent attempt by six of the biggest British clubs and a number of others from Europe to break away and form this European Super League. They obviously planned it all in secret over a considerable period of time, but once the news broke and fans, vociferously argued against it, and a number of players and managers said they were not at all on board with it, within a couple of days the whole thing fell apart. Shows that the fans and others have a say and should be given that voice in a more planned and constructive way that actually gives them some power in the game. The games should be about the fans first and foremost. And so we should, I hope that what happened this season with the European Super League will lead to moves to give fans more power to make decisions, influence clubs, influence the FA, etc., and make it a sport that's truly owned by the fans once again. Rather than by big owners and big money. I did want to give a little sort of shout out to managers, because we've seen Mourinho come and go again this year. He was kind of fun and exciting to start with when he first came to this country at Chelsea. He was sort of amusing, but I found him a bit of a misery over the last few years.
Many people agree with you, Tom. They find him quite tedious now.
Yeah, but I find Guardiola and particularly Klopp an absolute joy. Klopp's absolute love of the game and joy.
Yeah.
And his laughter when interviewed, and his big smiles. Sure, he can get angry like any other manager when things don't go right, but people like that coming into British football and instilling in their teams an extraordinary improved ways of playing the game. That's all about possession football. That's all about a high press, high tempo, and movement and creating space and creating attacking opportunities. It's fabulous to see. And you go back 20 years, something like that, in British football, we saw a lot of long ball football, poor quality. That was reflected in our national team, who failed dismally, repetitively at big championships. And over the years, we've seen through managers, including Sir Alex Ferguson, more recently managers like Pep Guardiola and Klopp and others, we've seen a complete change where football is now about keeping possession, passing the ball on the floor, lots of movement, lots of attacking flair and creating chances. And the quality of football is, 10 times better than it was 20 years ago. And those managers and coaches are to be given the credit for that more than anyone, I think. And it's great to see. I love Klopp. I think he's fantastic. But
Yeah.
Guardiola's clearly, in my opinion, is probably the greatest coach in the world, coach and manager in the world. And his teams play incredible football. I mean, 8-10 years ago when he was at Barcelona with their just unbeatable team, it was just extraordinary to watch his teams keep the ball for like 6, 7, 8 minutes at a time. Just give it to each other, give it straight back again. To take time. I mean, it gets criticised as tippy-tappy football, but they basically say, yeah, this is our ball. You're not going to touch it. Try and get it off us. And when teams tried, then they'd attack and exploit the space that's created and score goals. So it's just fabulous to see teams play such high-quality football. And with so many touches, players now of such great technical ability. They're super fit, obviously. But the technical ability of players is probably better than it's ever been.
I agree with you. We haven't got time now to discuss it, but I have had debates in the past in terms of the Pep versus Jose. I mean, I think what Jose's achieved in football surpasses Pep in terms of trophies. I think that he took Porto to the Champions League and won it. He took Inter Milan, who were falling apart, and within 2 seasons, they'd gone back to winning the league for the first time in a long time, and they'd won the Champions League. He took Chelsea from the Tinkerman, if you like, in 2004-05, and he won the 2 league titles that he came in on. There was no period of adjustment. There was no 3 or 4 years adapting. He just came in from Porto, and he won those 2 leagues for Chelsea. All right, his football is nothing like that of Pep Guardiola. But Pep Guardiola, the foundations were built by Johan Cruyff, Barcelona. There was the 2 previous managers before Pep. They'd already put the massive foundations in terms of the youth structure. And he went then from, obviously, certainly taking full advantage of that at Barcelona and creating the team that he did. He then went to the top team in Germany, who were basically untouchable. And he won the league, but he didn't win the Champions League. If he wins the Champions League in 2021 next weekend, it's the first time he's won it since 2011. And yet he's spent well over $1 billion. I think it's close to 1.5 billion between 2011 and 2021. So I think there's a massive debate because the style of football is definitely better under Pep. But I think what Jose has managed to achieve with clubs that had fallen well behind or were just out of other teams' leagues, for me is better. And he's also, I think Jose Mourinho has also taken on clubs that Pep wouldn't have touched. I mean, for example, he went to United, whereas Pep was offered the opportunity, having sat down in a meal in New York with Alex Ferguson, and effectively being offered the job. And Alex said, "When I go, would you, like to step in?" And he said he was pretty much given, the affirmative, the green light. Obviously, at some point, big money came along, and Pep changed his mind. But I think the context and the nuances within those means that it's still a really serious ongoing debate because of the clubs that they've taken up and the clubs that they've achieved with.
Yeah. Before we move on, Jace, I must give a sort of bit of a shout out to our local teams. Not quite in Dorset, but we obviously have nearest Premiership team is Southampton, and having started the season a little bit dodgily, they've improved, had some great results. Ings has been bashing goals in, and in particular, and they've finished in a very respectable position in the league and done well this season. It's been a good season. Bournemouth are in the playoffs. from the
They won it up.
Championship. So fingers crossed they're 1-up against Brentford, but got a tough second leg in the semi-final away at Brentford. So good luck to Bournemouth with that. And our local team, Weymouth, having gone up the season before to the National League South, they've struggled this year, and it looked like a relegation battle, but they've managed to finish a few places above the relegation zone. But I think relegation is cancelled this year anyway. I think
exactly. I was just going to make it clear to the viewers that relegation had been cancelled anyway. So and we also need to also throw out, you know, teams like Poole Town, Blandford, other teams around
Dorchester, Bridport.
City on Dorset Eye. You know, we retweet anything that Blandford Town puts out, and any other teams locally who want us to do the same, just follow us and tag us. That would be great.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Lots of great grassroots football. You know, and I work close to the Marsh in Weymouth. I've several times recently gone out, and you see 4 or 5 youth football teams and sometimes adult football teams training, playing games. They're male and female teams. Great to see huge numbers of people back playing sport again, especially the youngsters. That's brilliant.